Sorry.
Hello everyone, good late afternoon. I'm Cole Bunzel, I'll be doing the last of these. I'm a PhD candidate in the Near Eastern Studies Department. What I really study is history and religion in Saudi Arabia as the subject of my doctoral research. What I also do, relatedly, is study jihadism, particularly Sunni jihadism, and the ideology behind it. And I've written at length about that. I have a long paper for the Brookings Institution that came out last month, if you're interested in learning more about that. But today I'm really going to be talking about Western Muslims and ISIS, so which you've already gotten from the last presentation, some introduction to. So what I'll do, though, is differently is I'll go over what ISIS is, just so we're all on the same page there. I'll talk about the demographics of the foreign fighters, the Western foreign fighters, such as we understand them, their motivations, recruitment. I'll show you profiles of some of the actual Western foreign fighters, including their own video testimony, so you can have a sense for how they understand their own motivations, what, in their opinion, is the appeal of this group. And then I'll draw a few conclusions for you that you don't have to accept. So ISIS is an acronym that stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham. That is actually an old acronym for the group. The group in June 2014 dispensed with Iraq and Sham. So more accurately, it's the Islamic State, or IS, but ISIS has such a ring to it that it's stuck around. And in Arabic, it has another acronym, which is on the form of ISIS, that the group doesn't like, and that Arabs like to use, Daesh. So that is stuck around in the Arab world. And there's this whole debate about, what to call this group. I go back and forth. It's not that big. I mean, we can talk about that debate if anyone has an interest. But I might call it ISIS or the Islamic State. It's a Sunni group. That's probably the most important thing to understand. It is very much distinguished from a kind of Shi'i militant group. It actually is more interested in fighting the Shia than it is in fighting the United States. So it comes out of a theological background that is basically has its origins in Saudi Arabia in a theology called Wahhabism, which is basically predicated on purifying the faith of all perceived accretions. And Shi'ism is perceived in this theology to be the worst of all accretions. And the apostates, that is, those who have abandoned the religion, and that includes, from their point of view, the Shi'i, or the Shia, they are worse than the so-called original kuffar, or the original unbelievers, the Christians and the Jews. Another important thing is that it's a state-building project. You're more likely to hear it described as a terrorist organization. They wouldn't, obviously, describe themselves in those terms, but in all reality, it really is a state-building project. It uses gruesome violence, which can be described with all sorts of synonyms, but at the heart of this group is an emphasis on building up this state. The word state in its group is not, a metaphor, it's literal. It claims since June 2014 to have established the caliphate, which I believe Professor Shaikh talked about earlier, about what a caliphate is. Okay. So in ISIS's conception, the caliphate is the only lawful form of Islamic government that can exist in the entire world. And it harkens back to a vision of the early Islamic State founded by the Prophet Muhammad in Medina in the 7th century, and that was then developed by his successors, the so-called four Khalifas, the four rightly guided caliphs, and then it assumed different forms after that. But what these guys are looking to is to recreate that sort of unitary imperial state that stretched across all the way from Spain essentially to India back in the 8th century. And that is their understanding of the caliphate. Of course, over medieval times, there were multiple caliphates. They weren't always understood in these terms. And the last caliphate was abolished in 1924 after World War I, when the Kemalist Republic basically decided that they wanted much less to do with religion than before. Did you have a question?
Yeah, the Israeli press does use the term Daesh. So what does Daesh actually stand for?
In Arabic, for Dawla al-Islamiyya fil Iraq wa Sham, meaning
The Islamic State of
ISIS.
Okay.
But it has sort of an ugly sound.
And what is the territory of Sham?
Shem basically is the Arabic word for Greater Syria. So that's why when it expands, so let me just get back to this real quick. So the group is established in October 2006 in Iraq by members of a group called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So this is where it was, at this point, an Al-Qaeda branch or affiliate. And it doesn't do well after 2006. And it's only really after the Syrian revolution begins in 2011, and you have this large chaotic space in northern Syria that is very Sunni, that ISI, the Islamic State of Iraq, is able to move there and declare that it has expanded. It's expanded its jurisdiction and its sovereignty to what it calls Sham, meaning Greater Syria. So rather than using Syria, which is another word for Syria, they'll use a more kind of Islamic word for it, or Sham. So that's where they declare that they have sovereignty there. Yes?
I've also seen and heard ISIL, and that's for the Levant. Is that basically different connotation for the same thing?
Yeah, Levant is, it's
Syria.
just a French word, basically amounts to the same sort of territory. Okay, so I got the expansion, and the next thing that happened in the success of this story, and there really was a kind of dramatic success. Nobody had heard of this group, even though it was founded in 2006 until really 2013, when first it went to Syria, and then it went back to Iraq, and it basically conquered all of the Sunni territories in western Iraq. And the largest city there was Mosul. I think that's on the map, yes. So you might often read that Mosul or Raqqa is the capital of the state. It doesn't have a capital. That's all wrong. But these are probably the two biggest cities. Mosul being here in northern Iraq, and Raqqa being here in northern Syria. And this gives you, well, first of all, so in June 2014, the group expands kind of back to Iraq, and it has so much momentum that it decides that it's going to redeclare the caliphate that had basically not existed since 1924. And a lot of people thought, wow, this is bizarre. Like, they're really going to do that? And they did, and there are a lot of reasons why they did it at this time, why Al-Qaeda didn't do it. There's certain qualifications that a caliph, according to Islamic law, is supposed to possess, and according to ISIS, their caliph, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, does possess all of these things. But that's one thing. Another is, if you just look at, this is not updated actually, a lot of these territories down here have been retaken by the Iraqi army, or the Iranians. You can see that how they control territory is by, they have roads and they have cities. And it's not really clear how much control beyond that they have. So when people say that this is a state that is the size of England, well, you have to understand that they're really only controlling the kind of the arteries of the state. Going on, the number of people in this group is, really poorly quantified. The last time, the most official estimates are above 30,000, but that's from the CIA and a few other sources, and that's almost a year old now. I would say it's at least 40,000. The number of people, and I'm just talking about in Iraq and Syria, the number of people that the state so-called governs is at least 4 million. What is more is that it claims, because it's the caliphate and it is this expansionary, unitary state, that it is establishing provinces across the Islamic world. So it claims to have a province in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, and this province produces its own videos. It has a province in Libya, and Algeria, and Yemen, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nigeria. And so the way that it understands itself, if it draws a map of itself, as it sometimes does, is it's like this all-encompassing entity that is, burning across the world out of the center of Iraq and taking over the world. And that is really the kind of interest of this group. It's more interested in its expansion and consolidation than it is in attacking America. That is until, well, we resumed fighting it in August 2014 when it was threatening to take some of our allies' territories, notably the Kurds in Iraq. And since then, we have been bombing them on a regular basis with a coalition, and that's when you get these awful beheading videos of Americans and other Europeans. Okay, so demographics. As I said, there are about, we can estimate maybe 40,000 fighters. There are an estimated 20,000 foreign fighters among that. Now, when I say foreign fighters, it's important to distinguish between Western foreign fighters and the foreign fighters in general. So the vast majority of these 20,000 estimated foreign fighters, and these statistics are from January, and they're from the International Center for the Study of Radicalization in England, and they seem to be pretty good, but they're also, as I just spoke with one of the gentlemen responsible for this the other day, they're very speculative. But they do add up some important things. One is that Western Muslims are not a majority whatsoever of this group. So just to show you, this is a map of the flows, which is also not entirely accurate when it comes to the numbers. But the flows are accurate. So you can see how there's a lot more people coming to fight for this group from particularly Tunisia. Mohammed, I don't know why, but and from Saudi Arabia. Then there is from Europe, though the European stream is still quite impressive. And there have been in the past, similar sorts of causes that have mobilized European Muslim populations to go fight abroad, such as in Afghanistan in the 1980s, and then later in the Balkans and a few other places. But the scale of this is really what is astonishing people and is kind of making people question the paradigms that they've had for a long time about what motivates foreign fighters in the first place. So, yes?
Are there any Sunni Iranians?
I have never seen an Iranian in any video who wasn't being killed.
Okay.
Yeah. So the biggest contributors you're often going to see in their propaganda videos, French and Germans. There are a lot of Russians because Russia has 16 million people and contributes perhaps that many foreign fighters. What's important to keep in mind, though, is that even when these are rather high, like in the French case, this is a very, very small number of the overall population of Muslims in these countries. For example, France has some 4.7 million Muslims, 1,200 over 4.7 million is very small.
There is a difference with the map, where in the map you have 400 instead of...
That's because this map is from like a year and a half ago, relying on data from even well before that. And the data for such things is very hard to collect. The largest per capita contributor, and this is probably a real mark of shame, is Belgium. For some reason, there are a lot of Belgians contributing. Belgium only has 650,000 Muslims, which is rather small for all these countries put together. The United States, as you can see, doesn't contribute very many. Canada, probably a few more. I'll show you a video of a Canadian who's no longer alive. But the Germans and the French are probably the most active. Yes, sir?
I'm just wondering with these foreign fighters, do they have to pick up their own expenses to be able to get there? I was just struck by, some of the
Right.
larger Islamic countries that you would think would be sending more people that aren't. And I'm wondering if it's because they can't get there.
Right, so for somebody in Western Europe, it's not terribly expensive to take a flight to Turkey and make your way south to the border with Syria. And as you can see, Turkey has an enormous border with Syria, and that's how practically all the foreign fighters come. Now, I've seen, this is just circumstantial evidence, but in a lot of reporting about the foreign fighters, you see things like, $1,500 were transferred to somebody's bank account before he was trying to flee his country to go to Syria. So there is money being traded, certainly, but I don't know if that's in the majority of cases.
I just thought it was interesting when you look at some of the bigger countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, places where you think there's a lot of potential Muslim population.
Right. And they have contingents, certainly. I've seen a lot of particularly Southeast Asians in their videos, but not, an overwhelming number. And the support there, it's across, it's on the entire opposite side of the world, so, as is America. So, there are a whole range of factors that determine which countries contribute the most. But a lot of these we're not quite certain. Like, why does Tunisia, for example, contribute so many? And it was the start of the Arab Spring. It would kind of make sense that Saudi Arabia contributes a lot, because historically it's contributed a lot to sort of international conflicts involving Muslims like this. But Tunisia is a bit different. Okay, moving on a little bit. When we talk about, a lot of people try to talk about who are the people that are susceptible to recruitment to this group. And it's actually really difficult, in my opinion, to generalize too much about the foreign fighters. Most are certainly young men, but on the other hand, according to the International Center for the Study of Radicalization and their numbers, about 15 to 20% of them are actually women. A lot of the women are going with families, because a lot of these people go in families, and most of them actually, also importantly, they go in groups of people. They don't go, by themselves. But it's important to note that there isn't like a single profile of the foreign fighter. Like, there's the young male with testosterone, that's one profile, but it isn't, something that you'll observe in all cases. And you have, most of them are what you might call heritage Muslims, people who are from, Middle Eastern background or something like that. And then you have a much smaller number who are converts, maybe 20%. And in the propaganda, the converts feature much more prominently. And just European Muslims in general feature very prominently. I'll try and discuss some of the reasons for that in a moment. The stated motivation, if you ask these fighters, and I'll show you some of their testimony, why are you here? Why are you fighting? It's almost entirely ideological, the way that it's discussed. That they are here to defend Islam and to restore this authentic form of Islamic life. You have, of course, another whole range of factors that contribute to people's motivations. We have to, unfortunately, speculate a great deal, because it's not like these people are taking surveys. Also, one thing to keep in mind is that the Islamic State doesn't let you leave. I've translated their fatwas about this. If you go to the Islamic State, you have made emigration to the land of Islam. You're not allowed to go traveling in the land of the unbelievers. That's prohibited. It's prohibited to go back. So this is like it's a huge leap to go. It requires abandoning, your entire existence wherever you're from to go and make this journey. So you have, of course, a lot of people in their statements. You can tell that they have grievances, political grievances. They feel like the Muslim community is under attack, particularly by the West and by Iran. They clearly identify with a kind of perhaps imagined Muslim global community. And some people also argue that they're going there to kind of fulfill a sort of a sense of purpose that they don't have in their home families. Maybe they have dislocation, and that they're there for adventure. And one of the reasons a lot of people talk about, oh, they're there for the thrill of it, is because the videos, a lot of them are very modern and fancy, and they look like video games. And I think that's, as Professor Jamal was pointing out, I think that's all true. But unfortunately, it's harder to prove that they're motivated because they want to go for the thrill of it. I mean, this is an enormous choice to do. And in general, it seems that most Westerners in the group are more ideological than the average group. Yes, Professor.
2 questions about coming and going.
Yes.
Does the state itself issue passports? And do you think that the people who are coming know fully how difficult it, at least in theory, will be to again leave?
I do think that passports, no. They don't. There are all these pictures of, oh, they have passports. They don't believe in passports because they don't believe in borders. And yeah, but there are lots of pictures of phony Islamic State passports. You see a lot of videos where they burn their passports.
They're old ones.
So yeah, so when they're leaving and they're coming to ISIS, they know, they've seen the videos of their brethren burning their passports. I mean, this is you can't go back from this decision. So I'm biased because I study their ideology, but I see them constantly discussing the ideology. And it's a very simple ideology, almost a caricature of Islam. And I'll show you some people discussing it in a moment. Okay. As for recruitment, like I mentioned, most people, like the people tend to go in groups. You'll often hear reports about 3 girls of Somali descent who are caught in an airport going together, or somebody going with his brother and sister. This is the most common thing to happen. So the radicalization process is estimated to take about a year. It can occur either over social media, you're contacting people on Twitter and direct messaging, and they're like, oh, I'm in the caliphate and life is wonderful, and you're like, oh, I feel so guilty because I'm not in the caliphate and helping you. And that sometimes the FBI is the guy pretending to be in the caliphate and trapping people. This has happened a fair amount. But there are also a lot of cases where radicalization is taking place because of a certain preacher. Usually this is in Europe, who is not, who has kind of a low profile but is obviously radicalizing young men and women. One thing that's a little strange is that given how kind of small a portion of ISIS is represented by foreign fighters, their propaganda is heavily weighted in favor of the foreign fighters. So this is, for example, these are pictures of their ISIS's English language magazine, which is called Deb, and its French language magazine called Dar al-Islam, the land of Islam. Deb is the site of a battle in Islamic eschatology that is supposed to take place in northern Syria at the end of days. So you can, and these are very kind of glossy. The English, I can't speak for the French, but the English is really good. I've been reading Al-Qaeda documents for many years, and their original English publications were god-awful. So they've really improved. They have people who speak English now and write English. There's even a whole media agency, it's called El Hayat, for English language videos, and I showed you these beautiful magazines. So they're definitely catering to a Western audience. I think partly this is also because they're trying to look, modern and cool, and the West is advanced, and we're showing that, look, even Westerners are joining us. Come join us. That's part of their whole message. So what I'm going to show you next is a video of a man named, he's German, Tristan David Emda, who took the name Abu Qatada. And this video is it's an interview with a man who's a German journalist who actually went to the Islamic State. He got a kind of certificate of safe passage. Really kind of a bizarre thing to do. And he was there for 10 days last December, and he went all around, and he took video, and he talked. He's German, so this interview is in German. And he kind of has probably some of the most useful insights of anyone trying to understand the Westerners in a group, because he talked to a lot of them, and as you'll see, he talks with them at length. So this particular gentleman is about my age. He's from Western Germany. I've read in a profile of him that as a young man he was a social justice advocate, and that he used to kind of identify with the grievances of the Muslim community, and was radicalized rather quickly. And he emigrated with 10 others from the exact same hometown, right?
It's small.
Yeah.
It's very small. Yeah.
Yes. So I didn't even know that. So it's a very small town and a rather large number of people. And as you'll see, the gentleman explaining why he's here isn't an idiot. And according to the interviewer, he's actually quite eloquent. I don't speak German fluently, but you can see for yourself. So here is the first bit of him talking.
Abu Qatada, was ist die Motivation dafür, dass Sie heute nicht in Deutschland sind, sondern hier als Kämpfer im Islamischen Staat?
Der erste Grund der Motivation, warum ich und auch alle anderen Deutschen oder Europäer hier sind, ist als erstes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ja, also von ihm zu gehorchen. Denn es ist ein Befehl von Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, und darüber sind sich die Gelehrten einig, dass die Hijra zum islamischen Staat Pflicht ist. Ja, und dass die Auswanderung von jedem vollzogen werden muss und dass dieser Staat von jedem unterstützt werden muss. Ja, und deswegen sind wir diesem Aufruf nachgekommen, haben die Auswanderung hier vollzogen und dann sind wir hier.
Is everyone able to see that? Okay, a little blurry from my perspective. But as you can see, he kind of has a rather coherent view of the situation, such as he understands it. So these Westerners can often actually be some of the best exponents of the ideology of the group. For example, he talked about the duty of emigration, or hijra. You're supposed to, if you're a good Muslim, according to this ideology, you're supposed to leave where you are and emigrate to the land of the Muslims. He talks about how the scholars are all agreed on this. There's a sense that there are actually scholars in ISIS who are intelligent people, and that this is a mission for defending Islam. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I'm just curious why there's such an emphasis on like English and French and German. Because if it's appealing to people who are already drawn towards Islam, shouldn't it be in Arabic? Or is this, maybe I'm missing, is the target audience not people who are already interested in the movement? It's people who are on the outside looking.
Well, so usually we have a skewed understanding of their media because we see the, what's directed toward us. But the vast majority of what they produce is in Arabic and is directed to an Arabic-speaking audience. But they do produce a whole lot in these other languages. And it seems that it's really actually unclear. Nobody knows exactly why there's this much of an emphasis on it. Like there isn't an Arabic magazine for ISIS, but there's an English and a French magazine. It'll be translated to Arabic, and then people always want, where's the translation for the third article? It is a little bizarre. But I think it has something to do with this appeal to, look, we're modern and we're advanced technologically. Also, just this particular journalist, he's German and he's speaking with German. So this is a little different in this case. Let me show you one other clip with him where he illustrates rather, kind of disgustingly but extremely well what the group thinks of the Shia. Because I think a lot of the times we're thinking of this group as, oh, they're like Al-Qaeda, they want to kill us. But if you think they hate us, just look what he has to say about the Shia.
Abdullah the Belgian, as he...
That's the wrong one, sir. This one.
Die Schiiten Iraks und die Schiiten Irans, die 150 Millionen, die es auf der Welt gibt, weigern zu konvertieren, dann heißt es, sie werden getötet.
Genauso wie wir das 150 Millionen, 200 Millionen, 500 Millionen, uns ist die Anzahl egal.
Werden sie dann alle Muslime in Europa, die sich ihrem Glauben nicht anschließen, töten?
Der sich unserem Glauben nicht anschließt, der schließt sich dem Islam nicht an. Ja, und wenn er auf seinen Irrweg beharrt, dann natürlich gibt es auch keine andere Wahl außer das Schwert. Definitiv.
Das sind sehr harte Aussagen.
Das sind nicht die Aussagen, die ich treffe, sondern das ist das Urteil des Islams, was über diese Leute gesprochen wird. Und das Urteil der Abtrünnigkeit, und jeder Abtrünnige wird getötet.
Yeah, I'm not sure we even saw all the subtitles, what it said.
If you don't adopt a modern form of Islam, you don't adopt Islam at all.
Yeah.
No, if you know Muslim, it's always over.
Okay, well, as you can tell, he has a very severe interpretation of the religion, which is premised on we need to eradicate heresy. The heretics are those who are not like us, and it doesn't matter how many there are, we're going to win. It's rather...
The Shiites.
Yeah, the Shiites. But also, kind of bad Sunnis. Although the Sunnis are perceived as people, particularly Europeans and Arabs, people who, could be brought to our cause. But the Shiites, not so much. Okay, so the next video is from a different interview with a man from Belgium and his son. And this is an interview that is from a documentary done by the Canadian Vice News. It was a very famous documentary. A man last summer, I believe in August, who is a British Palestinian citizen. He spent about 3 weeks in the Islamic State. He and this other man, the German, are the only people I've ever heard of being allowed as journalists. Usually they kill journalists. You've probably heard about that. It's strange that they are allowing some journalists, that they don't seem to be doing it anymore, to go there and film at length. And this is in Arabic with subtitles, and this certain Belgian man seems to be of Arab descent. I can't quite capture what his accent is. Maybe somebody can help. Let's see how he understands what are his motivations.
Abdullah the Belgian, as he's called, travelled to the Caliphate from Belgium with his young son.
هل هناك تجاوز في الناس؟
والله في كثير 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 من الإخبار، والله كثير خصوصا من الشباب، كثير من
أنت من بلجيكا ولا من الدولة الإسلامية؟
تحب ترجع بلجيكا؟ لماذا؟ ماذا يوجد هناك؟ كفار، وهنا ماذا يوجد هنا؟ دولة الإسلام. تحب دولة الإسلام؟ أكيد. ماذا تريد أن تكون مجاهد أم عمل استشهادية؟ مجاهد. لماذا تحب الكفار؟ لماذا تحب الكفار؟ ايش عمل الكفار؟ يعني هم مثل المسلمين. كل الكفار. مثل كفار أوروبا. أيوة. والخلافة قامت بإذن الله وسوف نغزوكم كما كنتم تغزوننا وسوف نسبي نساءكم كما سبيتم نساءنا وسوف نيتم أطفالكم كما يتمتم أطفالنا. تكبير! الله
What does takbir mean?
It means say, essentially, God is greater. Allahu Akbar. Kind of like my father. Just kidding. You can get a sense of the the kind of passion and zealotry.
The accent is, I would say North African, but it's a mix of, he's using modern standard Arabic. But
Right.
behind that, it's much more pronunciation than, I would say Morocco, so I think it's not related to the Middle East.
Right, but
That
you
would
can.
be my guess, but I'm not sure. So I'm not interpreting all
No, it's fine.
basic things, but I saw that as well this video.
Right, and just to give you a sense of where these ideas, from their perspective, are coming from, this van that they're standing in front of, where the young child is, he's standing in front of an ideological or a theological treatise that was written by a man named Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who died in 1792 as the founder of Wahhabism. So it's, they're very explicitly tying their movement to this mission about purifying the faith. The next thing I want to show you is what this German journalist says to in his CNN interview, where he talks about how he goes, how he's spoken with dozens of these men, these foreign fighters. Of course, he never talked to any of the women, and he can ask why are you here? And his impressions are probably a little bit different than you might tend to think. So. Your mask is working.
Is the cursor working?
Oh, there it is.
It comes from this enthusiasm that nobody can explain. I told you I spent 2 days in a registration house where 50 people arrived every day. And when I saw these brilliant eyes, these happy guys, and not losers who may have lost their lives or missed their lives in their home countries, winners, people who you cannot imagine. Or in the city of Mosul, I met people from Belgium, I met people from France, Britain, and Sweden. A wonderful Swedish guy, blonde Swedish guy, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "It's the time of my life." I said, "Why?" And he saw that I didn't understand him, and I didn't understand it. I cannot understand that, and you will not understand it. It's incredible. It's a very, very strong movement. I repeat it like a tsunami, like a nuclear tsunami.
Yeah. So my takeaway from this is that a lot of the people who he's kind of seeing are just intoxicated by their own being there and being part of this, this holy mission, as they interpret it. I bet they have a lot less, of a sparkle in their eye right now, now that they're basically under siege every day by drones and planes. But the number of foreign fighters is still estimated to be about the same. To be increasing. The rate of them going there is about the same as it ever was. So that's a little disturbing. But where I take issue a bit with Mr. Toddenhofer is when he talks about how they seem to all be winners. I've definitely seen a lot of videos of people who do not look like winners. And so just to give you an example, the next man I'd like to introduce you to is named Abu Muslim, Antoine Poulain. He's a convert from Toronto. He's no longer with us. He died at age 24 in 2013, and he had been killed, I think, by the Assad regime. Like many others, he went in a group of people, 4 other Canadians. He does not, despite what his own testimony will attest, he is not a winner. He was a former janitor with a troubled past with law enforcement, all sorts of weapons possessions related kinds of crimes. So I give you Abu Muslim. In a moment. Because nobody should be subjected to that. Just a little background on this video. So it's believed that a lot of the foreign fighters, when they arrive, they're made to make a martyrdom video. Or a last will and testament sort of video. So this video comes out actually after he's killed. I want to show you anything gruesome.
And they put it on YouTube or where did
they'll put it on YouTube, they'll put it on archive.org, they'll put it on basically everything and everywhere, and using Twitter. Yeah. So this is just an excerpt from a much longer video where he talks about how great he is.
Before I come here to Syria, I had money, I had family, I had good friends, I had colleagues. I worked as a street janitor. I made over $2,000 a month at this job. It was a very good job. It was a very good job. And even though I wasn't rich beyond my wildest imaginations, I was making it. It was good. And I always had family to support me, and I had friends to support me. So it's not like I was some social outcast. It wasn't like I was some anarchist or somebody who just wants to destroy the world and kill everybody. No, I was a regular person, and...
Yeah, so he wasn't. It's nonsense. And also in this video, I think, which is more revealing and actually truthful, is that he says, look, we need doctors and we need people with skills. Like, we need less people like Andre Poulain. So I think actually a lot of the people going there are not winners, but they might seem like they are. This is, I should just read to you briefly. This is a summary of an official German government study from December 2014. It's the only such public study that I'm aware of where the Germans, they look at 378 cases of their foreign fighters who have gone to fight in Syria, and they draw the following conclusions. It says this: unsurprisingly, the majority of the travelers are men, 89%. The average age is 26.5, and about 2/3 are younger than 26. Nearly 2/3 of the travelers were born and raised in Germany. About half of them are married, and 104 have children. Women who travel to Syria are on average 3 years younger than their male counterparts and are also more likely to be converts. There is evidence that some families have taken their children with them. Information about educational level is available in less than half the cases, but of the data available, the study notes that the educational level is below that of the average population. Out of 378 people, 249 had committed criminal acts before they left the country. Before they turned to Islamism, the majority of the offenses were violent acts and offenses against property. But during radicalization, these offenders would commit more so-called politically motivated offenses, like criminal acts directed against political or ideological opponents. Ultimately, while the demographic data in this study are useful and interesting, the diversity across the categories confirms the findings established in other studies that analyze Islamist homegrown terrorists. There is no reliable socio-demographic profile of jihadists, which is kind of my conclusion. You have all sorts of people. It's very hard to estimate, not to draw broad brush conclusions about them. Last thing I can go over briefly if you want. These are some of the cases that you might be most familiar with if you read the New York Times or something. This is wrong. It's Mohammed Mwazi, excuse me. He's the British Jihadi John who figures in many awful beheading videos. I don't want to show you his face because I hate him. He's not a stupid man. He has a degree in computer engineering. His boss in Kuwait said he was his best employee he's ever had. He was born in Kuwait but grew up in London. He's from a wealthy family. So it's, what profile does he fit into? It's not really clear. Mohammed Hamza Khan, an American, he was 19, from Chicago. He had a very limited education, but he was very loyal to his local mosque. And this is a man who didn't have the savvy to actually make it to the Islamic State. He got caught, rather embarrassingly, at the airport in Chicago. And I've read the letter that he wrote to his parents, where he talks about his motivations for going. And it's all littered with, with theology and about Islam and about all the causes that the German man mentioned above. Nothing at all different. There's nothing about dislocation. It's just all about defending the brethren. Then there were these 3 teen girls from Denver a few months ago of Somali and Sudanese descent. There hasn't been a lot of information to come out about them yet, but it's quite clear that they were being influenced by social media and that that's how they were caught. They had for, it seems, several years had favorable views of groups like Al-Qaeda. And perhaps to end on a slightly more upbeat note, you have a case of 2 British gentlemen of South Asian descent here who were young, in their 20s, had very little education, and before they left, they even bought Islam for Dummies. So, this case is actually, I think, exaggerated by a lot of people who are trying to score a sort of political point. First of all, these guys didn't join ISIS. They joined another group, and they left. They went back. So they weren't very loyal or committed to begin with. And obviously, because they bought that book, they don't know anything about the religion. So, on the other hand, it shows that you can, without knowing anything about the religion or the ideology, adopt it very easily, because it's very simple. It has this Manichaean view of the world, us versus them, belief, unbelief. We're appealing to the prophetic model, yada yada. With that, I will see if you have any questions. Thank you. Yeah.
Just a quick question about the whole idea of the infidel that they describe. Is it supposed to just mean the Shia Muslims, or since you're seeing those videos online of these American journalists and people being beheaded, is that more, not so much waging war on Christians or people of other faiths, or is it like a warning sign as like a sort of way of encouraging the Western world to mind their own business while they eradicate these Sunni, Shia Muslims?
Right, so I guess there are 2 levels. On one level, there is this war against all unbelievers that is inevitable and necessary. But there is also the fact that they're explicitly saying, when they're beheading the Americans in those videos from last year, that they're doing so in retaliation for America bombing. And once the air campaign picked up, the speaker of the group made a statement where he practically quoted Osama bin Laden to the effect that you should kill an American or European wherever you find him or her, which was not actually something that the group had said. So a lot of it is kind of retaliatory. Okay. At least that's how it's framed. Sure.
So to on that, the term infidel, the semantics of it, you could write a book on it. I mean, some interpret it as meaning infidels are all non-Muslims. A lot of scholars also say that the original infidels that are spoken of by the Prophet in the Quran actually referred to other Arabs who were not quite following the ways, and there's a million different interpretations of what an infidel actually is. So it depends on who you ask, really.
Yeah, I mean, their understanding is that they're looking at certain verses of the Quran which describe the duty to fight the kuffar, the unbelievers, the infidels, and that's their take. Rather simple, not too many colors. Sir?
The claims of provinces. Is that to try and get people in those areas to rise up, or is it to try and recruit people from those areas, or is it just kind of like historical fantasy? At one time these things were claimed by the Caliphate, so we're going to say it's back.
Right, so a lot of people thought that when some of these announcements of provinces were made that it was fantasy, but it hasn't, you know, and in some places it has been sort of fantasy, like in Saudi Arabia there have been no videos of ISIS operating, even if they tend to have a province there. But they do have provinces which show that have videos in Sinai, it's one of the most active, in Libya, and just in the last week, a couple of videos coming out of Yemen. They're really trying to capitalize on the chaos that's emerging there. Also in Nigeria, the group Boko Haram has given its official allegiance to the Islamic State there by becoming a province. Though it's really not clear what kind of operational connections there are between the two groups. But it's more than fantasy. It really is a, it speaks to their mission, and it changes actually the duties that it imposes on the global Muslim community, according to them, which is that you have to make hijrah or emigration to the Islamic State. So if you're in Libya, you can now make emigration to your local wilayah, your local province.
So
they actually literally say
essentially their argument is that they want insurrection there, so it's going to add on to the Islamic State.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the way you have Alaska and America and the United States,
right?
All part of the same entity. But
quick question, you said that Saudi Arabia typically wasn't doing too much with them. I'm just a little, the Wahhabism.
Sorry, I didn't understand the Saudi Arabia part.
Just in the last question, you said Saudi Arabia wasn't doing, there weren't a whole lot of provinces or activity in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And this is just me a little behind. The Wahhabism was central to the formation of Saudi Arabia. So is there a reason why they're not getting a whole lot of support from that area?
So they actually do get a lot of support from Saudis. It's the second biggest contributor of foreign fighters after Tunisia. And both the Islamic State and Saudi Arabia, they claim the mantle of Wahhabism, right? So there's a tension. And it's very troubling for the Saudis because they're struggling. Their religion is in a civil war and they're caught in it. But they have a history, particularly in the last decade, of cracking down on jihadi activity in their country. They're very intolerant of anyone who is vocal about supporting jihadism. So it's a good security state.
Kind of caught in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they leave. They're not operating in the country. There have been a couple of minor attacks that have been attributed to them.
Isn't it fair to say, like, Wahhabism, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, as good as it's outside of Saudi Arabia?
Not quite, actually, because Wahhabism has evolved, from a kind of fierce, we need to militarily destroy heresy. That's kind of what it was like in the 18th century to what it is today in Saudi Arabia, which is we need to protect the monarchy and respect our authorities, and we're going to purify the religion by publishing and by exporting our ideology with books and global Muslim organizations, things like that. So they definitely both are Wahhabi, but they're different versions of Wahhabism. There's a whole variety. I've talked to some very kind of, you might call them the most liberal Wahhabis in the world, in the north of Saudi Arabia, where there are even certain kind of 19th and 20th century radical Wahhabi thinkers who they sort of disown and think those guys were radicals. And these are the Wahhabi figures that ISIS is drawing a lot on for its radical ideas.
So there's a whole, tension. Wahhabism, I don't think should be equated with terrorism. It certainly seems susceptible to weaponization, but that doesn't mean that it's ISIS is in any way inevitable.
Okay.